Hello, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 4 of the Virtual Coffee Podcast. I'm Becca, and this is a podcast that features members of the Virtual Coffee community. Virtual Coffee is an intimate group of developers at all stages of their coding journey, and they're here on this podcast sharing their stories and what they've learned. And we are here to share it with you. Here with me today is my co-host, Dan.
Thanks, Becca. In this episode, you'll hear from Vijayakumar. Vic is a principal software engineer at Research Square, a preprint platform. When he's not at his day job, he works on his bootstrap startup, Every Oak, a school management system. Vic is addicted to building things. Vic sat down with us to tell us about his experiences with indie hacking and gave us his take on when to ship, what to focus on, and the value of diverse opinions in your community, among many other things. It was a really great conversation, and I personally learned a lot. Just as a production note, this is actually the second time we've recorded with Vic. We had a technical mishap and lost the first recording, but Vic was gracious enough to sit down with us for a second time. And so I just wanted to say another thank you to Vic for joining us again.
We start every episode of the podcast like we start every virtual coffee. We introduce ourselves with our name, where we're from, what we do, and a random check-in question. Today's question is, if you could add any superpower to your abilities, what would you choose? We hope you enjoy this episode. Hey, I'm Becca. I am a front-end developer from a small town in Ohio. And if I could add one power, I would add telepathy.
Telepathy is dangerous. Hi, I'm Dan. I'm a front-end developer from Cleveland. And I think if I could pick a superpower, it might be teleportation. That always seemed like a good and handy one to have.
Solid choice.
You would save so much time.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Vic. I am a full stack principal engineer from Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm also an indie maker. My preferred superpower of choice would probably be to be right the first time, every time.
Also would save you time.
So much time.
All of these. This is what it essentially is all about. We just want the superpower that saves us the most time.
It's really just telling, honestly. We're just telling on ourselves.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Vic, for being here with us. We are very happy to be recording with you. So we always like to get a little bit of background on our guests, and so we'd love to hear about how you got into tech.
Sure. Okay, so I actually have kind of a traditional background, if you will, in the sense that I have a bachelor's degree in computer engineering from Iowa State University. But before that, probably, so we used to own a computer when, not like when I was super young, but when I was in high school. And then probably the first like programming thing I did was that in high school, one of my parents' friends actually, they invited me to come do like a month-long internship with them. So I wrote software for them the very first time. Like I'd never written code before, but they helped me kind of write code for the Kenya duty-free shopping network. So I worked in Visual Basic and like Access or something like that. And for that, they paid me with a US robotics modem. So that was my very first quote unquote paid project for writing code. And then let's see. And then really I didn't do anything else kind of like programming related until I went to college, where I kind of did a lot of different like tech support kind of jobs. But my very first kind of like breakout into software development, like web development, came when I got let go from the support job. And then I was just looking for something else. And the Office of Admissions at Iowa State University, they were looking for an entry-level programmer. And I was completely unqualified for this job, but I applied for it anyway because someone said I should. And I figured, okay. So I applied for this job. And they pretty much told me that. They said, you are not qualified for this role at all, but you sound confident and you look like you could learn. And so they gave me this job, and which then became a full-time role after I graduated college for a little bit. And then when my girlfriend, then wife now, moved to North Carolina, I got another job, and I've been at that job for 14 years. That actually is the entirety of my journey into tech.
I love that. And there are so many hot tips dropped there. Apply for jobs that you are not qualified for. Sound confident
definitely.
in those. All right. So that is how you got into tech. Now, how did you come to find virtual coffee?
Oh, this is a fun one too. So I think I saw one of your tweets, Becca. It was April last year. Everything was a dumpster fire, and I think I hadn't seen any adults in a couple months because I hadn't been going into work anymore since about February or so, actually. And then I saw your tweet. I think it was in a Code Newbies thread or something like that, where you talked about virtual coffee, and I figured, hey, I should go make some new friends. So that was probably I remember responding to your tweet, and then I missed the first one of those, and then I came to the second one, and I think I've come to just about at least one session every week or so.
Yeah, that is awesome. You have been here for almost the entirety of virtual coffee, because we did, I think it was the first week of April. We're coming up on our 1 year birthday or anniversary or whatever very soon.
It's crazy.
Right?
The throw party.
It's like literally I have an issue open in a repo that's like birthday party. Okay, so we are talking to you today about indie hacking. And so the first time I heard the term indie hacking, I thought it meant like somebody that hacked independently. And so let's start there with the actual definition of what indie hacking is.
Sure. I mean, so it is a portmanteau of independent and hacking, but hacking in this case actually refers to, I think indie making is probably a better term than indie hacking. But I think right now it's used kind of synonymously with the indiehackers.com community, which is like one of the largest community of indie makers. But it oftentimes refers to people that are just independent, like solopreneur, like bootstrap developers that are kind of making and pushing out various products. Sometimes you do it for money. A lot of times you just do it because making things makes you happy. I fall into the latter category.
All right, so let's talk about some of those things, because you're making lots of them, right?
Yeah, some things end up going out publicly, and a lot of things don't. And I'm trying to do a much better thing of that this year. So I've built a lot of stuff, and then I used to kind of have this outlook of, oh, I didn't. This thing is not perfect, and I'm just going to kind of not let it go out. And my thing now has been to like push things out as drafts and kind of talk about them publicly, because you never know who is going to be interested in the thing you're building. Let's see, one of my biggest projects, and it's actually used, is called EveryOak. It's at everyoak.com. It's a preschool management software, and it's used by my kids' school, actually. I was really sick of filling out all the various forms that I had to fill out when I dropped them off. So like right now they do COVID screening, but they don't use paper because they use, EveryOak. When you're applying, you have to fill out all these various forms. You have to fill out all the allergy information. And when it changes, you have to go drop off new forms and all kinds of things. And I didn't really want to do that. So I worked with them to basically build this thing. And a lot of different schools were interested in it. I have 2 schools that use it right now, and it's profitable. But yeah, that's probably the biggest one. I've built a few other things that. So I ran this beer festival for the last 10 years in Raleigh. It's not happening this year, but it happened the last 9 years or so. Let's see, what else?
Well, I just want to pause for a second and touch on EveryOak, because I've got 4 kids. So filling out those forms requires an incredible amount of time and ridiculous effort because we're doing it every single year, the same forms, right? Like why do we have to continually do this? So anything that makes that process easier is, in my book, like the best thing ever.
And a lot of parents think that too. Like this, so usually what happens, right, is the schools open up enrollment, and then it like goes on for like a month or so, and then the schools take another like, I don't know, month or so to do the assignment. And at my 3-year-old school, they actually just finished doing enrollment and then did a class assignment in like a few hours and sent all those out already. And the parents all love their choices. And meanwhile, you have all these other schools that are still having their parents drop off forms. And I mean, it's, there's a pandemic out. Even if you're not lazy, I still don't want to come drop off forms. And then their class assignment takes so long. Anyway, it's the parents love it, the schools love it, and it's going decently. I don't expect to get rich off of what preschools pay me, but it makes me really happy to be able to do this, and it makes me especially happy that I don't have to fill out forms.
So with every in particular, I imagine with the indie hacking sort of like mantra is, if you have an idea of something either in your life or something that like you are excited about or would like make your life easier, and just kind of go for it, right? With Every Oak, there's the motivation from your side as a parent is clear, the and it seems like a cool problem to solve. And you said so the next step, you could either do it in a vacuum, or you said you actually worked with your school to figure it out, especially with daycares and things like that. That seems like a tricky thing to step into unless you have some assurance that you're doing it the right way, or the way that a school would want. So how did that process work out, like at the beginning at least?
Yeah. So you said the right thing there, which is that it definitely is easier to work on things that scratch your own itch, because you just have to talk to fewer people, right?
Right.
But in order for something to be, I mean, it depends on how you define success, right? If you want to build something for the sake of building something and just get that muscle memory working of just building things and getting them out, maybe you want to only scratch your own itch. But if you're trying to monetize it, or if you're trying to help people other than yourself, you're going to have to go talk to people. It's definitely easier when you're working with just one school, right? But then the fun thing is, so I built something very custom to that school, but then I saw things in their process that I could improve. So I would work on like those improvements and then show it to them. And they were really happy with what I did. And they kind of just, once they realized that I was making their process better for them, they just let me just do the things that I thought were good ideas. And and then when the next school joined up, I said, here's a system that works really well for school one. And they said, great, if it works for them, it'll probably work for us.
Sure.
And then, so at this point, I'm basically, becoming an expert in building workflows for preschools. And they trust that I know what I'm doing because some other school uses it. So it's kind of like, I don't know what to call it. It's kind of just like, I don't know what you call it, clout by just faking it, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And yep, I don't know. I lost my train of thought there.
I mean, I've worked on a few other things too that like don't necessarily kind of are not that easy in terms of thinking about how to make it work. So let's see. So I have like, I mean, you want me to tell you about things that didn't work?
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely.
yeah, and it was a thing that I learned. I definitely did learn something there as well. So I built something called, it was called dog ears because I found this picture of this dog I really liked with droopy ears, and I was like, that's a good name for this thing. So it was just a product that would help you like search through your Twitter likes and retweets and whatnot, because Twitter's interface itself doesn't like let you do that really well. So I built this thing, and my goal was just to like see how fast I could build this thing. And it took me about like an hour a day for 12 days is what it took. And ultimately, it failed because I was using like a trial version of Algolia, and I realized that if I had to pay for it, like it was just not
Yeah.
sustainable at the price that I could charge for it. And so I just let it die. So the website for that is still out there, but you can't really sign up. But I learned like a ton of stuff. I learned about like all the wrong things you could choose. I learned about like needing to make sure that something was sustainable before you spend time on it. And the thing is, this wasn't even like something that scratched my own itch, because ultimately I didn't care about this problem.
Yeah.
So I just let that one die, but I learned a ton of stuff out of it. um, I learned a lot of new tools that I had not previously used. So I got something out of it, and I consider that a win.
For sure. I think that the framing of what a win is really important there, right? Because you are learning something. You can take that to a different project. Maybe it's not going to be the same product that you're making, but now you have experience that guides the next thing that's going to be better. And if it's something that you're interested in, then great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have a lot of things like that, right? Where the next thing I build, I'm not going to be starting at zero, because I'm going to take whatever, all the failed parts, all the good parts of dog ears that, didn't fail. I'll probably start from like something where I already have a site, I already have a way to charge people, I already have, all of that going, and then I save myself a whole lot of time. And I think it definitely is helpful like that way to have like a framework, a framework of how you would do things, because it means you don't spend time chasing shiny things of like, oh, let me like build a whole new framework of like how to do this. Instead, you're focusing just on like, what problem am I going to solve? It's been helpful for me anyway. I don't know if I like said that clearly, but
I just learned so much from everything that you just said. I love that. Like, and starting with, this idea of you're not starting at zero the next time, right? Because there's this like sense of like, oh, I've failed at something and now I have to start over. But you're not starting over at zero.
yeah,
I think
totally true.
sorry, I was going to say, I think another interesting aspect of that is that, I mean, we can all agree to not view this as a failure, or at least as a negative thing, right? But knowing when to pull the plug, or stop, stop putting effort or money or time into a thing like a side project like this. Do you have like you mentioned you had sort of lost interest in the problem itself, which is, I'm sure, a big warning sign, but do you have like a rubric that you use for your own side projects of when to leave, or is it just like when it feels like
Yeah,
I'm done with
so
this?
that's a very good question, and it's actually kind of deep, right? I have this problem. I don't know if I still have it or not, but it's this thing of like, I like starting new things, far more than I like to. So I like starting new things, and that's like kind of like the most exciting part of it for me, right? But it's a bit of a negative addiction, right? To start new things, but to not actually like keep working on them. So I have to kind of plan for the possibility that I'm going to lose interest in that thing. So the way that I kind of um, work to mitigate that is that I have started to launch things as soon as possible. And if I use the preschool management thing as an example, right? So the moment I launched it and real people started using it, it was no longer a thing that I could just say, no one uses this, I can just shut this down and move on to something else.
Yeah.
Now, first of all, I had proved that someone wanted to use it, you know, and there were real consequences to me abandoning it and not working on it anymore. And the fact that someone was using it then made it a lot more fun to like keep working on it. So
Yeah.
it kind of helped that situation. But um, not using that example, when do I know when to stop working on a thing? When I'm not having fun with it. Because if I'm not having fun doing something, I'm not going to keep doing it. So people often like talk about like, how do you choose a problem to work on? And so there's several schools of thought on this. One is work on something that is going to like make you rich, for example. I don't know. That's an actual rubric some people go with. Or work on something that like you're passionate about. Maybe that works for you. Or like work on something that, I don't know, some other rubric for you. And I guess if you're not having fun with it, if you're no longer motivated to keep doing that thing, that's probably the time to move on, or at least pause it. If it's the sort of thing that can like keep going while you can focus on something else, then that's good. If it's the sort of thing that if you stop working on it will just die off, I don't know, maybe you should have launched earlier, or I don't know. It's totally fine, right? It's totally fine to just stop working on the thing if that's what makes you happy.
Yeah, that's a struggle that I've had with things like this is sort of guilt. I mean, like losing interest. I just kind of automatically stop working on something if nobody else is asking. My
abandoned projects need friends,
right? Like, I don't know, or guilt, or I don't know, shame even. I mean, it's not like deep dark shame, but it's like I have these like random side projects. There's links to them on my site probably somewhere, from years ago, and it's sometimes it's hard to not feel bad, or embarrassed of a thing where you can clearly look at this and say, oh, this is a failed side project, right? Like, a thing that went nowhere. Whereas the framing of this was a side project and it was kind of fun and I learned some stuff, and I think is a very healthy and good way to frame things. And it seems like you personally have most of that figured out pretty well.
I hope so.
I want to touch back on this idea of when to launch. You said, well, like maybe you didn't launch early enough. So I know there's like lots of different perspectives on when you should launch and how much you should have done, what features you have planned out, or have you completed most of the features on your list. So I want to know, what is your personal take on process and when to launch?
You should launch as soon as you feel ready. That's the thing. But sometimes you have to force yourself to accept that something is ready. Otherwise, you will keep waiting and waiting and waiting, and it's possible you might lose the motivation to launch it, right? So, and the thing is, I think when I say the word launch, people often think like press release or like tweet about it. It doesn't have to be that. You could silently, quietly launch it and tell nobody. But it might just be a psychological win for you to know that, oh, that thing is on production on a secret URL, but I can access it and it works and I can log into it and I can use it, might be the psychological win that you need to keep working on it. And that's totally fine. Or sometimes you can just launch something with just a sign up URL that says coming soon and sign up for this, which is good enough, right? For at least like drum up some excitement or whatever. But yeah, I would say that is just entirely up to you. But I like to default toward pushing something out early and then iterating on that, as opposed to waiting a long time and then like ending up with, bit rot or something like that.
I feel that all so deeply. I am the person that creates things and then doesn't put them out there. And I was working on this project earlier this year, and it was very like deeply personal, but I had like quietly launched it just so I knew about it and one other person. And I had said like, I'll probably put this out to the public in about a month or so. Well, they missed that in about a month or so and then like posted about it on social media.
No.
And I was like, okay, well, I guess somebody pushed me off the diving board and now I'm going for this, which in that sense like was really good. The project wasn't done and I scrambled for a couple of days, but also I might not have launched the project had somebody not been talking about it.
If you push something out and if someone starts to use it and their feedback to you is this is good, but it could use more, that's good feedback. I would rather that than no one use it. I would totally get negative attention than like none at all for, something that I launch. But I'm glad you were able to do that. Like that situation would probably stress me out if someone did an announcement of something that I built, but I wasn't ready for it yet.
It stressed me out. It did.
Can you talk a little bit about like some tools you use to make this process easier, when you're working on side projects, things like that?
Yeah, so I use a lot of no code tools, actually low code tools, I should say. So I'm not one of those people that like builds entirely with no code stuff, but I do use like Airtable and Zapier are probably like my two biggest things, where I just duct tape things together when I need to get them to work really fast. So the other day, I had this like, I don't know, I thought of this joke, and it was kind of a really silly joke, and I told you, Dan, or I said it's a community for people who are working from home to talk to each other, and they're in their sweatpants. It can be called meetsweats.com. And then I laughed about it for so long.
I Vic slacked me this on a Friday night. I was watching TV with my wife, with Emily, and she had to pause what we were watching because I was laughing so hard. And then, I shared it with her too, which she also laughed. But I was just sitting there on the couch on my phone laughing, and it was just about meetsweats.com.
And I was like, surely that's already a website. So I went there, and it didn't exist, and the domain was available. So I bought, meat like MEET, sweats like, sweatpants. So I bought meetsweats.com for $4 because I was like, this is like $4 is going to be worth it for me. And then I think I spent like the next 2 hours. So I put my kids to bed, and I was still kind of giggling about it while I was brushing their teeth. And they're like, what is it? And I was like, nothing. It's nothing. You won't get it. I put them to bed, and it feels like forever ago, but it was just last week. And while they were falling asleep, I just sat in a room with my laptop, and I built out the site for this and launched it. And it took probably like, I don't know, like an hour and a half or so. And for that, so I just, I went on card.co, and so that's a site that I use for this, where I push out a site, and I built a form on the site, and it uses Airtable, and it like people can sign up to be notified. And like all of these are super helpful, and it's a way to early launch something, right? While you decide if this joke is worth any more than like the airtime it already got, and whether or not the funny thing is like something like 15 people signed up to be early notified when
It's
the
me.
beta of Meat Sweats. Yep.
Number one.
You were the first sign up.
Founding member.
So this is probably a really good example of like, or like, I mean, I don't know anymore. Like, is it a joke? Well, if it's just a joke, like all these people want to be notified of like when this thing launches, and then a few other people like quote tweeted it with their ideas of what it should be. And I think this is kind of a vote for like building in public, right? You don't really know what it should be yet, but you take ideas from the community. And this whole thing, so it was card plus Airtable, and I think that's pretty much all it was. And it went out there. But a few other tools I use are Zapier, like I said, and then I use things like Mailchimp to manage like newsletters and stuff. But otherwise, I have a pretty traditional, just a not traditional, I guess I should say. I have like a skeleton. I have a skeleton project that I just spin up for everything. And that way I'm not spending my time, trying to figure out, oh, what should I choose for this project that I'm building? And it's just something that I've kind of forced myself to not do anymore. Where I don't like it, unfortunately, it removes the excitement of it. Like I used to be like, oh, I'm going to do this thing. And then I would spend the first week of it just like building the authentication, doing all these other things. And now I just know that I don't have to do any of that. I could just spin up the skeleton project and just start off. And I know that at like minute one, it can already charge people, which means that I focus on like the actual problem instead of like the distracting other parts of it. So that's really helped me out. It also means that I start fewer things, because it means that I have to like actually come up with like what I'm going to do before I start on it.
I think that's great. I think that's a great and sort of newer way to think about a lot of this stuff. And as I've been a developer for a long time, and it's natural to like, think of a problem and say, okay, I'm going to start writing React from scratch, and or whatever it is, because I don't know, because that's what my job was, or is, and sometimes it's hard to not do that, but making it easy for yourself to get going on solving the actual problem seems very like a very good way to do things like that, especially if you're starting things from scratch often, right?
Uh-huh. This year I plan to do that many, many more times. Like I was hoping to start a new project every month. Or I don't know. I haven't yet decided, but it's January 28th, and I think Mitsuotsu is probably like the project of this month. But in February, I'm gonna have to decide like how much more work I'm gonna do on that, or if I'm gonna pick a new project. And it's just training, I guess, to like to just push more things out in public.
Yeah, I really like that mindset. And I've got 37 projects. So if you would like one, I will let you do it for February.
No, thanks.
Yeah, that the point Dan was making before about using things, there's a tendency to devalue tools that make projects easier if you could use something harder like React, right? Or building a site from scratch rather than using a template. And I wish that more people were talking about how you can do these things to spin up projects like what you're doing, or saying like, look, this is just as valuable as a site that's done in React, because who really cares if they are solving the same problem?
But, yeah, your user doesn't know what you did. I mean, they don't care what programming language you're using. They don't care what CSS framework you're using. They just care that you're making their life easier. It does. I don't believe that. Like, if you use something easier, like, I don't know, like, I mean, if you're playing a video game, I guess it's entirely only in your head as to, what mode you were playing it on. It really doesn't matter ultimately. I think I like just thought of something a little bit more insightful to say to that, but that's all I can think of right now. I mean, I use lots of low code and no code things all over the place. It's not even just for starting, right? Sometimes, so like that beer festival that I talked about earlier, I don't remember what it used to be at the very beginning, but it's been running on Airtable for like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years now. It works just fine,
Yeah.
I will never replace it. I'm not going to, spend a bunch of time moving it over to Postgres or whatever. It works.
Yeah, absolutely. We in one of the virtual coffees last week, or maybe Tuesday, somebody was asking about like if they were freelancing and somebody asked them to make a site, like what they should do, right? And some of the answers at the beginning were, oh, just write it in, I don't know, React or Gatsby or something, or, even 11D. And then we kind of were talking about it for a while. And especially if somebody's paying you to do it, they also probably don't care what technology it's written in or what you use. Yeah. And if you are able to stand up a site like you have that, like using Card, for example, right? For a Card is a service that is basically a landing page service, right? And you can add a form to it, I think, and maybe something else. But
so I have an example about this actually, so when I started Everyoak, it used to be just an Airtable form, it was a React page. It was a React form, but then it's submitted to Airtable, and that was actually it, because there was no login or anything like that. Parents would come, like, fill out their application, and then the rest of it kind of got built around that. And like, it ran that way for 2 years, where all it did was submit to an Airtable. Like, I didn't move it over to like MySQL or anything like that for a good solid 2 years, and it worked just fine. The parents don't care. It still makes their lives easier. And then the reason why I moved it was ultimately because I exceeded Airtable's like free limits, not because I thought like oh, I'm doing something that, really good programmers don't do or anything like that. I moved it because I just didn't want to pay money for what I was doing. That's why I moved it.
Yeah.
And I don't think people should be like, oh, if I use a low code or no code tool, I'm not a good programmer or something like that. That's if someone is telling you that, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. And the framing of how a person values themselves and their abilities, I feel like is either starting to shift, or maybe I'm just like finding better vocabulary about it. But that, like, if a client, for instance, I mean, I'm independent developer, right? So clients are the way I think about a lot of this stuff, right? But if a client is paying, like, is paying you, they're not paying you for code or React or whatever, right? They're paying you to get the thing that they want, right? They're paying you to have the daycare, like, management software done, not to do it in the most, detailed way that some other judgy person would judge you for, right? They don't care.
Exactly.
And so, my point is just like, to provide value is the thing that you're working on, not that you're working on becoming like a React expert or whatever,
Right. And it depends, of course, whether you're doing this in a job but actually, even at my day job, we actually use a lot of Zapier and Airtable. Like we're on the enterprise levels of both Zapier and Airtable, because like you got to maximize, your value. And we don't want to be building all these. So this is just going to come off as like product placement for Zapier and Airtable, but there's so much stuff that we just don't want to. All this duct tape we just don't need to do.
Yeah.
Because it's cheaper to pay for those tools on a monthly basis than it is to spend any amount of time like building all the plumbing.
Yep.
That's all I'll say about that. So this doesn't become a huge like endorsement or anything.
No, it's true though. And cheaper, like if you bill for the hour, or if you're an employee or whatever, like anybody's time is worth money and somebody's paying for it eventually, right? So anytime you can save yourself time in, a productive way, it's like it's an easy win. It's an easy decision. I love it. Zapier, I have just started scratching the surface of Zapier over the last couple of months. I think based on your recommendation, but it's just been, I don't know, it's been a revelation.
I kind of use it all over the place. I have some zaps that just tell me like, okay, so this is a pre-2020 story, but I have some zap that just tells me, like, it monitors various like races that I used to run, like road races. And it just tells me when like registration opens up for those races, so I can go register and get bib number 1.
That's
so
awesome.
I just have like a bunch of random automations like that.
Can you or one of you explain what Zapier is?
Sure, it's plumbing. So let's see, what's the best way to describe Zapier? So let's see. So I have it ties together various services. It takes events from one service and kind of like pipes them into another. So as an example, let's say that I have, okay, this is a real one. So anytime an event starts on my calendar, I have Zapier watch for that. And 3 minutes before that event starts, it marks me as do not disturb. And then 3 minutes after the event ends, it like changes my status back on Slack to clear. I have some like a lot more complicated ones where like I have, I run a little script that watches the race website, and it looks for like a specific word on that website. And if that word is found, it sends me a message on Slack and sends me a text message, and it lets me know that I should go register. But you can like have this, you can have it like send emails, or I can have it say that anytime someone fills out this form and a new record appears in an Airtable, I want you to do like these 15 other things, like maybe fill out an invoice or send out an email, or like you could have it do a bunch of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be many, many steps. It can run like every 5 minutes or something like that.
So it is a time-saving superpower?
It is 100% a time-saving superpower.
Yeah. And for me, I found that once I've started like using it, because I'd read about it and been like, well, that sounds cool, but not really dug into it. But once you start using it, the ways that you can use it, like it changes how your brain thinks about everything. It's pretty crazy to think about. The what we're using on Virtual Coffee site, we have some random forms that collect information in various places, for example, and those forms are submitted on Netlify. And so now Zapier is getting notified when that happens, right? So the form goes to Zapier, and then, for instance, we are saving the record in a right now in a Google Sheets row, and also submitting an issue on GitHub for it or whatever too. That's just one way that we're using we're using Zapier right now. It's, I don't know, it's very cool. Could you tell us about Airtable as well?
Sure.
You've talked about it a lot.
Airtable is just, I mean, it's very much like a Google Sheets or any other spreadsheet. There are rows and you can group them and sort them. But once again, it allows you to like do things based on rows changing. And it has a really, really nice API. So I've used it as kind of like a backend for a lot of stuff. There's a site that I built recently, like to allow parents to buy T-shirts for their kids and then pay the invoices. And then I was using Airtable for that. Yeah, there's not really much else to talk about. It's very simple. A lot of people use it. I think they're one of those like big billion-dollar companies.
So if you were building a service where you had to store content basically in any way at the beginning,
and then access it as an API.
The first thing you reach for. Yeah.
Can we jump back to indie hacking for a second? Because
yes.
I want to talk a little bit about what the community is like and kind of how you found a place in that community.
Sure. So I guess it probably starts when I started to follow various people on Twitter, and I realized that, there's a name for this thing, and it's like I shouldn't just hide the things that I do. Like it's actually good to share it in public, right? Then I found indiehackers.com, which is probably one of the largest of these, and I'm in a few other communities like that. They're all like Slack communities. Let's see. Wait, what was the rest of your question?
Just kind of like how you found your place in the community, or like what the community is like.
I find it to be very welcoming, honestly. It's there are of course a lot of very, very successful people in these communities. And you gotta make sure that you follow people that are slightly ahead of you or slightly below you, as opposed to just the people that are wildly successful, because then you kind of experience this survivorship bias when you follow people that are just making tons of money or have very, very successful products, and you don't really learn anything from them because I don't know, they've kind of they paint a much rosier picture of their success than perhaps what is real. So I find that it's important to follow people in these communities. Twitter is probably honestly the best place for this. Find someone that has under 1,000 followers, under 2,000 followers, and is posting daily about their what it is they're building, and a lot of them share their learnings, successes and failures, and you learn so much about it. And I get so much value from reading about people's failures and knowing I should not do that. And similarly, when I find people that are maybe still just starting with it, and I'm able to share my successes and failures with them, I really enjoy doing that. So I'm in the Slack community called Micro B2C, where it's a bunch of people that build micro business to consumer products. So let's see. So they Lunch Money is an example there. GG App is another example. There's lots of different ones there. And it's just great to it's great to be able to pose questions to them. For example, the Apple Store has changed some policy, and they say, you need to write your terms of service to be like this, and it saves you from going through the hassle of discovering all this stuff on your own. They're good places. There are also some paid communities. I'm not really a part of any of the paid indie communities.
Yeah, I love this idea of learning through failures because I don't know, we grow so much, but also it helps with our time saving superpowers, right? Like you um, get to I don't know, you get this knowledge and understanding that you might not get in any other place, right? And so some of my favorite conversations recently have been from people who have been there before and can share those. That's one of my first questions. Like, okay, can you talk about like your failure and failures and what you've learned? Because then, you know, like I'm a step ahead of where I was before and I don't have to go through that like really painful process.
Exactly right. So I love those people who share immediately, like very forthcoming with you about what they failed at. And that's just like such good vulnerability. And they don't want you to go through like the stuff that they've gone through. And I'm not a fan of the people that are like, oh, you'll find out. No, I don't want to. I want you to tell me. And so I bias a little bit toward the oversharing of failures.
One of the things that you said, sort of in the same realm of following people that are on your basically on your level of learning in indie hacking, I think is really good advice.
I mean, that's
For
not to
anything,
say you
for
shouldn't
anything.
follow wildly successful people, right?
Right,
You
right.
just have to take their learnings with a mountain of salt and like,
Yes.
I don't know, maybe aspire for their success, but not necessarily their journey, because everyone's journey is completely different.
Oh, absolutely. I I was going to say I feel like it's very good advice. Just I don't learning anything really, or not just indie hacking, right? I mean, I would give you the same advice to developers. I don't think I had framed it that quite the way you did, but it made me think that I should start framing it that way, right? Because when people are in a different phase, their perspective is different, even, you know. So if somebody's, it's not just that they have forgotten about the failures along the way and they happen to have a successful product, you know, but the things they're thinking about are different if they're managing a successful product versus trying to learn how to, you know, trying to learn at the beginning. It's something I've been working on a lot with virtual coffee, you know, and one of the things I've enjoyed the most is becoming close with people, you know, at different phases of the developer journey, the career journey, like, you know, everything. And I don't know. I just think it's such good advice, you know, is don't just always pay attention to the people with 1 million followers, you know, in whatever.
Yeah, I mean, they probably have valuable things to say. It's just that not all of it is going to work out for you. But the person that is like closest to you has actionable advice right now that,
Yeah.
you know, that is applicable and timely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. We talked about that in my breakout room today in virtual coffee, this idea of processes and growth and how so many times you might have a blind spot, especially like, you know, if you haven't been there recently. And so, you know, being able to fill in those blind spots are probably the person who is closer to the problem or your stage in the journey. And that's incredibly valuable.
Totally agreed.
I mean, I could talk about the low code, the services stuff for hours. This is just one of those
What
areas.
services?
The low code services, Airtable and Zapier,
yeah.
and just like different ways to hook all this stuff together. Are there any other notable low code services that you like to use besides we have mentioned so far Card and Airtable and Zapier? Are there any other interesting or cool ones that you like to use?
I think I probably use those more than anything else. I'm trying to think, but I mean, let's see. No, I think those form a bulk of my like. I think I can build anything with like just those three things. I mean, plus, you know, I don't just use that. There are people that use like, you know, something like, I think it's called Bubble or any of those other like things that let you like build a whole app with just like, you know, in no code local stuff. But I actually have them as part of my React app. So I'll build like, you know, a Next.js page that just happens to use, you know, Airtable as a thing. And I actually have a lightning talk on, you know, building an Airtable backed app next month, the virtual coffee.
Yeah.
This will probably drop in February, on February 26th.
I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to that talk and learning more about how you like hook up next, that side of it as well. Again, I could talk about this stuff for for hours.
So we talked about having community members around your space and the journey that you can learn from too. And so I'm curious to, how close to your projects are they in terms of the things that they're making? Like, so are you just mainly focusing on people who are doing things similar to you, or, how do you kind of learn from the people around you?
Oh, you mean like the specific niche I'm in? Niche? I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I say it both ways too.
They're kind of all over the place, actually. I follow several people that are like making candles, but like you learn something from that too, right? So this person makes candles, and they happen to use Card and Shopify to put together a site really quickly. And it's once again an example of like shipping quickly, right? And I don't mean like literally shipping the candle, but like actually like I think the process for a lot of bootstrap founders is very similar. So like in the candle making example, you could decide to build a whole business and build an elaborate site, and then like you could release it and find out that no one cares. Or you could announce that, hi, I, a small business solo founder, am thinking about making hand pouring candles, and it turns out that 100 people, and then you launch a little site on like Card or Shopify or whatever, and 100 people have pre-signed up, and it tells you that this there's interest for this, and that it's something that you want to do. And this particular one, so it's Terra Simply is the candle company I'm talking about, but it's just like Shopify, and she just pours candles in her house in Missouri, and it's like really, really, so I learned a ton of stuff from this, even though it has nothing to do with like building software products.
Yeah.
Right. And I follow like some people that like have other like direct to consumer stuff, like printing t-shirts on demand, and you never know what you're going to learn when you start following someone. And then you do, and you realize that this is like something that actually is really useful to you. I mean, and I just like learning random things. Like I'm super good at trivia. You should invite me to be on your trivia team. I just know random factoids that I shove in the back of my head for like someday when it's going to be useful. And I find that just following like kind of this diverse group of people, the only thing in common between all of them is that they are solo founders, is actually really useful. I listen to a bunch of podcasts too that I learn a lot of stuff from.
Oh, that's a great point. And just the diversity of, since it's not all around a technology, right? It's not, you're going to have diverse solutions and all the different problems. It seems like a very cool community to be a part of.
Yeah. And you're going to learn about like some tool that someone's using that like you had never even thought of. And you're like, oh, wow, that's going to be useful for me in my preschool thing or whatever.
All right, Vic, I think this has been a fantastic conversation, and I am so glad that you came here to have this with us. Where can our listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/Vic, V-I-C, Vijayakumar, Vijayakumar, or you can find me on my site where I blog about the most random things. So vicvijayakumar.com, once again, spelled the same way. And yeah, and I'm going to be sending out my first newsletter this month, I think.
I'm signed up for that too.
A bunch of people that have signed up. I don't know what I'm going to write about yet, but it's going to be interesting.
Listen, I will let you know I sign up for everything that Vic does because he's super awesome. So I can't wait until Meat Sweats drops because I know
what it's going to be
life-changing. Doesn't matter. You made it. I'll be there.
It's going to be the Fire Fest of our day.
Amazing.
Okay, well, we'll have all those links in the show notes, and you can find Vic in all of the very, very cool projects that he is working at there.
And at the Virtual Coffee community.
And at the Virtual Coffee.
Bye, y'all. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Vic.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Virtual Coffee Podcast. This episode was produced by Dan Ott and Becca Harrott-Weigel and edited by Dan Ott. If you have any questions or comments, you can hit us up on Twitter at virtualcoffeeio, or you can email us at podcast@virtualcoffee.io. You can find the show notes at virtualcoffee.io. Plus, you can sign up for our newsletter to find out what we've been up to.
Please make sure to subscribe to the Virtual Coffee Podcast if you haven't already. And if you feel like writing a review, we'd love to hear from you. Next week, we'll have Cameron Bardell and Rahat Chowdhury on the podcast to talk about mental health and tech and the intersection of the two. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.